There's a moment most people never admit out loud. It happens early in the morning. The alarm goes off. You open your eyes, and for a split second before the routine takes over, you ask yourself a quiet, dangerous question. How many more years do I have to live like this? Not because your life is terrible, not because everything is broken, but because something feels unfinished. You go to work, you earn money, you pay bills, you repeat. And somewhere deep inside, there's a voice whispering, "This can't be it." Most people silence that voice. They distract it. They bury it under responsibilities, entertainment, or excuses. But you didn't. You're here, and that means something. Because in this audiobook, How to Retire Early on Any Income, you're about to discover something most people never fully understand. Not just how to stop working early, but how to stop needing to work at all. You're going to learn how money can work harder than you, how time can become your ally instead of your enemy, and how discipline, quiet, consistent discipline, can buy you something priceless. Freedom, not the fantasy version, not the quit everything tomorrow illusion, real freedom. The kind where you wake up and your time belongs to you. Now let's be clear about something from the start. This is not a promise of overnight wealth. This is not financial advice tailored to your specific situation. This is education, awareness, a roadmap. Because the truth is simple. Retiring early is not about luck. It's not about earning millions. And it's definitely not reserved for a special group of people. It's about understanding a system and having the discipline to follow it long enough for it to change your life. And here's the line you need to hear right now. You don't retire early because you earn more. You retire early because you need less and invest the difference. That's the game. And in this audiobook, we're going to break that game down step by step. You'll discover why most people stay trapped in the cycle for decades, the exact mindset shift that separates workers from wealth builders, how the FIRE method actually works, and where people get it wrong, how to build your personal freedom number, how to accelerate your timeline even on an average income, and most importantly, how to stay consistent when everything in the world is trying to distract you. Because let's be honest, the world today is louder than ever. Notifications, endless scrolling, short-term pleasure everywhere. But wealth, freedom, control over your life, those still belong to people who can focus. And that's what this journey is about. Not just money, control. Now, before we go deeper, I want you to make a small decision, not a big one, not something dramatic, just a quiet agreement with yourself. If at any point in this audiobook something hits you, something makes you pause and think, something feels real, don't ignore it. That's your moment. And if this message resonates with you, take a second to like it. Not for the algorithm, but as a contract with yourself. A signal that you're no longer just listening, you're committing. Because this is not passive content. This is a shift. Now, let's begin. Now, Chapter 1, The Lie That Keeps You Working Forever. Most people believe something that quietly controls their entire life. They don't even question it. They just accept it. The belief sounds like this. You work for 40 years, and then you retire. That's the script. Go to school, get a job, climb the ladder, save a little, wait until you're 60, maybe 65, maybe later. Then finally, you're allowed to live. But here's the problem. That timeline was designed for a different world. a world where life expectancy was lower, a world where jobs were stable, a world where pensions existed. That world is gone, and yet the script stayed. So people follow it blindly. They trade their time, the most valuable asset they will ever have, for money, and then spend that money just to recover from the life they're living. Think about that. They work all week just to escape on the weekend. They wait all year just to feel alive for a vacation. And then they repeat it for decades until one day they finally have enough money but not enough energy. That's the trade most people make, and they don't even realize it. Now here's where things get uncomfortable, because if you're honest with yourself, you've felt this, that quiet tension between what you're doing and what you actually want. And maybe you've told yourself, this is just how life is. But what if it's not? What if the problem isn't your income or your job or your circumstances? What if the problem is the model you're following? Because the traditional path assumes one thing, that your income will always come from your effort. Time for money, hour for dollar, day for paycheck. But the FIRE method flips that completely. It asks a different question. What if your money could replace your effort? What if instead of working for money, you built a system where money works for you? That's the shift. And it sounds simple, but most people never make it because they're too busy surviving the system to step back and question it. And this is where everything begins, not with numbers, not with investments, but with awareness. Because once you see the system, you can't unsee it. And once you understand that your time is being traded, you start to ask a different question. Not, how do I earn more? But how do I escape the trade completely? That question is dangerous because it leads somewhere most people are too afraid to go. It leads to responsibility because if there's another way, then staying stuck becomes a choice. And that's not always comfortable to accept, but it's powerful because it means something simple. If the system can trap you, it can also be used to free you. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down exactly how that system works, the invisible mechanics behind financial independence, and why most people never reach it, even after decades of effort. Because the truth is, it's not about working harder. It's about playing a completely different game. And once you see the rules, everything changes. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Game. You were never taught. There's a reason most people work hard their entire lives and still never reach financial freedom. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they lack intelligence. It's because they were never taught the real game. From a young age, you're trained to focus on one thing: income. Get good grades so you can get a good job. Get a good job so you can earn a good salary. Earn a good salary so you can live a good life. Sounds logical, but there's a missing piece, a critical one, because income alone does not create freedom. Let that sink in. You can earn more and still stay trapped. You can double your salary and still feel stuck. You can even reach levels most people dream of and still depend on your next paycheck. Why? Because income is only one side of the equation. The real game is what you do with what you earn. And this is where everything changes. Because financial independence doesn't come from how much you make. It comes from the gap between what you earn and what you keep. And more importantly, what you invest. Now think about this. Two people, same city, same opportunities, same income. One spends everything they earn. The other saves and invests consistently. 10 years later, they are living completely different lives. One is still trading time for money. The other, they've started to buy back their time. This is the part most people miss. Money has two roles. The first is obvious: to spend, to survive, to enjoy, to live. But the second role, that's the one that changes everything. Money can produce more money. And once you understand that, you stop seeing money as something you use and start seeing it as something you deploy. That's the mindset shift. And it's uncomfortable at first because it forces you to look at your habits, your choices, your daily decisions. Every time you spend money, you're not just buying something, you're also giving up the opportunity for that money to grow. Now, this doesn't mean you stop living. It doesn't mean you become extreme, but it does mean you become intentional. Because every dollar has a direction, and that direction either moves you closer to freedom or further away from it. This is the core principle behind the FIRE method. Financial independence, retire early. Not about quitting your job tomorrow, but about building a system where your investments generate enough to cover your life. That moment has a name: the crossover point. The point where your money works harder than you do, where your investments produce enough income to replace your need to work. And once you reach that point, work becomes optional, not mandatory. Now here's where it gets interesting, because most people assume this requires massive wealth, millions and millions. But that's not always true, because your freedom is not based on how much money you have. It's based on how much you need. And this is where the equation flips again. The lower your expenses, the less your investments need to generate. The less your investments need to generate, the faster you reach independence. This is why some people retire early on relatively modest incomes, while others stay stuck despite earning more, because one focused on lifestyle inflation and the other focused on freedom. Now let's be honest. This idea challenges everything society pushes: consume more, upgrade constantly, chase status. But the FIRE path asks a different question. What if you optimized for time instead of things? Because time is the one resource you can never get back. Not later, not eventually. Once it's gone, it's gone. And that's why this matters. Because every year you delay understanding this is a year you give away. Not intentionally, but unknowingly. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to know everything. You just need to start thinking differently. Because once your mindset shifts, your behavior follows. And once your behavior changes, your results become inevitable. Now, before we move forward, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, where is your money going right now? Not what you think, not what you hope, but the reality. Because awareness is the first step. And if something here is starting to click for you, if you're beginning to see the game differently, take a second and drop a comment with one word: awake. Because that's what this is, not just learning. Waking up. Now in the next chapter, we're going deeper. Because understanding the game is one thing, but playing it correctly is another. And there's a reason many people who try the FIRE method fail. Not because the system doesn't work, but because they misunderstand one critical piece, a piece that can either accelerate your journey or quietly destroy it. And once you see it, you'll never approach money the same way again. Chapter 3. The Hidden Trap Inside FIRE. There's something most people won't tell you about the FIRE movement. On the surface, it looks simple. Earn, save, invest, repeat, reach your number, walk away. Freedom. But underneath that simplicity, there's a trap. And if you don't see it early, it will quietly slow you down for years. Because here's the truth. Not everyone who chases FIRE finds freedom. Some people reach the numbers, but never feel free. Others burn out before they even get close. And some give up completely. Why? Because they misunderstand what FIRE actually requires. You see, FIRE is not just a financial strategy. It's a lifestyle shift, a psychological shift, a long-term commitment that challenges your identity. And that's where most people struggle, because they try to apply short-term thinking to a long-term system. They want quick results, fast progress, immediate proof. But wealth doesn't work like that. Freedom doesn't work like that. Remember this. The first phase of building freedom feels like nothing is happening. That's the trap. You save money, you invest, you stay consistent, and for months, sometimes years, it feels slow, almost invisible. And that's when doubt creeps in. Is this even working? Should I just enjoy my money now? Maybe this isn't realistic. That internal conversation, that's where most people lose, not because the system failed, but because their patience did. And this isn't new, even in the materials you've seen, like there's a pattern that repeats itself over and over again. People start strong, then they stop. They invest for a few months, then withdraw when things feel uncertain. They wait for the perfect moment. They react to fear, they hesitate, and then they wonder why nothing changes. This is the real danger, not lack of knowledge, but inconsistency. Because compounding, the force that builds wealth, only works if you leave it uninterrupted. And most people interrupt it at the worst possible time. When the market dips, when life gets uncomfortable, when emotions take over, they step out right before the growth begins. Now imagine planting a tree. You water it for a few months, then you dig it up to check the roots, then you plant it again, then you stop watering for a while. Would you expect it to grow? Of course not. But that's exactly how most people treat their investments. They never stay consistent long enough to see the results. And here's where it gets deeper, because the real battle is not external, it's internal. FIRE forces you to confront things most people avoid: your impulses, your habits, your relationship with money. It asks you to delay gratification, to choose long-term gain over short-term pleasure, to stay focused when nobody else around you understands what you're doing. And that's not easy, because the world is designed to pull you in the opposite direction. Spend now, upgrade now, enjoy now. Everything is immediate, but FIRE rewards patience. And patience is rare. That's why this path feels lonely sometimes, because you're playing a different game. While others are chasing appearances, you're building foundations. While others are upgrading lifestyles, you're upgrading your future. And it won't always feel exciting. In fact, most of the time it feels quiet, repetitive, almost boring. But that's where the power is. Because the people who win this game are not the most talented. They're the most consistent. Now let's address something important. There's also a misconception that FIRE means sacrificing everything, living extremely, cutting out all joy, becoming obsessed with saving. And yes, some people take it to that level, but that's not the only way. Because the goal is not to suffer your way to freedom. The goal is to design a life where your present and your future can coexist, where you enjoy today without destroying tomorrow. Balance, but intentional balance, because without intention, you drift. And drifting always leads back to the same place, dependence. Now pause for a second. Think about your own habits. Where do you interrupt your progress? Where do you lose consistency? Because that's where your focus needs to go. Not on doing more, but on staying steady. Because consistency beats intensity every time. And here's the line you need to remember moving forward. It's not what you do once that changes your life. It's what you repeat when nobody is watching. That's the real game. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to break down something practical, something tangible, your personal freedom number. Because once you know that number, this stops being a dream and becomes a target. And once you have a target, you can build a plan. But here's the twist. Most people calculate this number completely wrong, and that mistake keeps them stuck longer than they need to be. Let's fix that next. Chapter 4, Your Freedom Number and Why Most People Get It Wrong. There's a moment when everything shifts from abstract to real. Up until now, this idea of retiring early might feel distant, interesting, possible, but still unclear. Because without a number, there's no target. And without a target, there's no direction. So let's fix that. Because your journey to financial independence starts with one simple question. How much is enough? Not for luxury, not for status, but for your life, your version of freedom. Now, most people answer this question the wrong way. They think, I need $1 million, I need $2 million, I need more. But those are guesses, not calculations, and guesses keep you stuck. Because they make the goal feel far away, even when it might be closer than you think. So instead of guessing, we calculate. And the foundation of that calculation is simple. Your annual expenses, not your income, not your dreams, your reality. How much does it actually cost to live your life for 1 year? Be honest here. Because this number matters. Everything builds from it. If your lifestyle costs $20,000 a year, your number will be very different from someone spending $80,000. And this is where the first realization hits. The more you need, the longer you stay. That's the lever. That's the variable you control. Now, once you know your annual expenses, we apply a concept known as the 4% rule. This rule comes from long-term market data and suggests something powerful. If you invest your money correctly, you can safely withdraw about 4% per year without running out of money over time. What does that mean for you? It means your freedom number is roughly 25 times your annual expenses. Let that sink in. Not infinite wealth, not extreme numbers, just 25 times your lifestyle. So if you need $40,000 per year, your freedom number is around $1 million. If you need $30,000, it's $750,000. If you can live on $20,000, it's $500,000. Now pause. Look at that again. Because this is where the illusion starts to break. Early retirement isn't about becoming ultra-rich. It's about aligning your life so your needs match your strategy. This is why some people reach freedom faster than others, not because they earn more, but because they need less. And before you resist that idea, let's be clear. This is not about deprivation, it's about intention. Because there's a difference between spending money and needing it. Most people spend out of habit, out of pressure, out of comparison. But when you start thinking in terms of freedom, you ask a different question. Is this worth delaying my independence? Every purchase becomes a trade, not just money, but time. Because every dollar you spend today is a dollar that can't grow for you tomorrow. And when you multiply that over years, that's not small, that's massive. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Because your freedom number is not fixed, it's flexible. You can lower it by reducing your expenses. You can reach it faster by increasing your savings rate. And this is where the real power comes in. Because your savings rate, the percentage of your income you keep, determines your timeline, not your salary, not your job, your behavior. Two people earning the same amount can have completely different futures. One saves 10%, the other saves 50%. Guess who reaches freedom first? And it's not even close. This is why the FIRE method works on almost any income. Because it's not about how much you make. It's about how much you keep and what you do with it. Now let's address something important. This number you calculate. It's not a prison. It's not a limit. It's a starting point. Because once you reach it, you don't have to stop working. You get to choose. That's the difference. Work becomes optional. And when something becomes optional, it changes how you experience it. Less pressure, more control, more freedom. Now take a moment. Think about your number. Even if it's rough, even if it's not perfect. Because clarity creates momentum, and momentum, that's what moves you forward. If this part hits you, if you're starting to see the path more clearly, drop your number in the comments, not for validation, but as a declaration. Because once you say it, it becomes real. Now in the next chapter, we're going deeper into the engine behind all of this, compounding, the force that quietly builds wealth, while most people ignore it. Because here's the truth, compounding is simple to understand, but extremely difficult to respect. And that's why most people never experience its full power. But once you do, you'll realize something incredible. Time is not your enemy. It's your greatest asset. If you learn how to use it, hey there, we want to remind you that we often choose topics suggested by you, our viewers, in the comments. In the comments, you can suggest a topic or ask a question about what you'd like to see in our video. We read every comment carefully, so we promise not to miss a single one. Thank you. Let's keep going. Chapter 5. The silent force that builds wealth. While you sleep, there is a force working quietly in the background of your life right now. You don't see it. You don't feel it. And most people completely underestimate it. But over time, it changes everything. That force is compounding. And if you truly understand it, not just intellectually, but emotionally, it will completely reshape how you see money, time, and your future. Because compounding is simple. Money earns returns. And those returns start earning their own returns again and again, like a snowball rolling downhill. At first, it's small, almost nothing. You push it, you keep pushing, and it feels like effort without reward. But then something happens. It starts to grow faster, heavier, stronger, until eventually it moves on its own. That's compounding. Now here's the problem. Most people quit before the snowball gets heavy. They stop when it's still small, because in the beginning, compounding feels invisible. You invest $100. You earn a few dollars. It doesn't feel life-changing. You invest for a year, maybe two. Still nothing dramatic. And that's where the majority of people walk away, not realizing they were standing right before the turning point. Because compounding doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows exponentially. Slow, slow, slow. Then suddenly, fast. And here's the part that changes everything. The majority of your results will come in the final years, not the beginning. Let that sink in. The effort is front-loaded. The rewards are back-loaded, which means you have to stay consistent long enough to reach the part where it accelerates. And that's not easy, because we live in a world that rewards speed. Instant results, immediate feedback, quick wins, but compounding requires patience. It rewards those who can stay still while everything feels slow. Now think about this. Imagine two people. One starts investing at 25. The other starts at 35. Same strategy, same consistency. But the first person has one advantage: time. Just 10 extra years. And that difference? It doesn't double their results. It can multiply them. Because time doesn't just add, it compounds. This is why starting early matters. But here's the important part. Starting now matters even more. Because the best time may have been years ago, but the second best time is today. And every day you delay, you're not just losing money, you're losing the growth that money could have created. That's the hidden cost. Now let's connect this back to your life. Every dollar you invest is a worker, not today, not tomorrow, but over time. It starts small, but if you keep sending more workers and you let them stay, they begin to build something, a system, a machine, one that doesn't depend on your energy, one that doesn't need your time. And eventually, that machine becomes strong enough to support you. That's the goal. Not just saving money, but building something that replaces you. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They interrupt the process. They panic. They react. They try to time everything perfectly. But compounding doesn't reward perfection. It rewards consistency. Because every time you stop, you reset the momentum. Every time you pull out, you break the chain. And rebuilding that takes time. That's why the people who succeed with fire are not the smartest. They're not the luckiest. They're the ones who stayed in the game long enough for the game to work. Now, I want you to picture something 10 years from now. Not in detail, just the feeling. Are you still working because you have to? Or because you choose to? Because that difference is built by what you do today, and tomorrow, and the next day. Small actions, repeated, over time. Now, if this is starting to shift your perspective, if you're beginning to see time differently, type this in the comments. Time works for me, because that's the mindset. Not rushing, not forcing, but aligning with the process. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that directly controls your speed, your savings rate, because this one variable has more power than your income, your job, or your background. And once you understand how to use it, you can compress your timeline in ways most people never realize. But there's a catch. Increasing your savings rate requires something most people avoid. And that's where the real transformation begins. Chapter 6, The Lever That Changes Everything. If there's one variable in your entire financial life that can completely reshape your future, it's this: your savings rate, not your salary, not your job title, not where you live, your savings rate, the percentage of your income that you keep and invest. This is the lever, the accelerator, the difference between working 40 years and working 10, 15, maybe even less. And most people ignore it because it's uncomfortable, because it forces a question most people avoid. Am I living below my means or exactly at them? Now think about how most people operate. They earn more and immediately upgrade their lifestyle. Better phone, better car, bigger apartment, more subscriptions. Every increase in income gets absorbed by new expenses, and the result? No matter how much they earn, they stay in the same position, dependent, because their lifestyle expands as fast as their income. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the biggest obstacles to early freedom, because it keeps you running in place. Now here's the shift. What if, instead of upgrading your lifestyle every time you earn more, you upgraded your freedom? What if raises didn't mean more spending, but faster independence? That's the mindset of someone playing the FIRE game, because they understand something simple. Your lifestyle today determines how long you have to work tomorrow. Let that sit with you. Every decision you make right now echoes into your future. Now let's break this down in a way that makes it real. If you save 10% of your income, your timeline to financial independence is long, decades. But if you save 30%, it shortens dramatically. If you save 50%, you start compressing time. And if you go beyond that, you enter a completely different reality, where freedom is no longer a distant dream, but a visible destination. This is why two people with the same income can live completely different lives. One spends everything, the other saves aggressively. Same starting point, different outcome, because one is consuming and the other is building. Now let's be honest again. Saving more is not easy. It requires discipline. It requires saying no. It requires going against what everyone else is doing, because the world around you will not support this mindset. It will encourage spending, comparison, status, comfort. But comfort is expensive, not just financially, but in time, because every time you choose comfort over discipline, you extend your timeline, you delay your freedom. Now, this doesn't mean you eliminate enjoyment. That's not the goal. The goal is control, intentional living, where you decide what matters and cut what doesn't. Because here's something powerful. Not all expenses are equal. Some bring real value. Others are just habits. And once you start separating the two, you unlock something incredible: clarity. Because when you stop spending on things that don't matter, you create space. Space to save, space to invest, space to grow. And that space, that's where your future is built. Now here's a practical shift you can make starting today. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" ask, "Is this worth delaying my freedom?" That one question will change your decisions, because it connects the present to the future. And once you start thinking like that, your behavior changes naturally. Now I want you to reflect for a moment. Where is your money going right now? Not in theory, in reality. What are the patterns? What are the habits? Because awareness creates leverage, and leverage creates change. If this is hitting you, if you're starting to see your habits differently, drop this in the comments. I choose freedom over comfort because that's the decision, not once, but daily. Now in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further because saving money is only one side of the equation. The other side is increasing your income, but not in the way most people think, because working more hours is not the answer. There's a smarter way, a way that aligns with the fire path without burning you out. And once you understand it, you'll realize something powerful. You don't need to work harder. You need to work differently. Chapter 7, Earn More Without Selling Your Life. There's a lie hidden inside hustle culture. It tells you that if you want more money, you need to work more hours, wake up earlier, sleep later, push harder, grind endlessly, and for a while, that works. You earn a bit more, you feel productive, you feel in control, but then something happens. You hit a limit because your time is finite. There are only so many hours in a day, and once those hours are filled, your income stops growing. That's the trap. Trading time for money has a ceiling. No matter how efficient you become, no matter how disciplined you are, there's a limit to how much you can earn this way. And if your entire strategy depends on working more, you will eventually burn out. This is why the fire path requires a different approach. Not just saving more, but earning smarter. Because increasing your income is powerful, but only if it doesn't cost you your life. Now let's reframe this. Instead of asking, how can I work more? Ask, how can I make each hour more valuable? Because that's where the shift happens. Not in quantity, but in quality. Now, there are 3 primary ways to increase your income without sacrificing your entire life. And each one builds on the same principle, leverage, the ability to create more output without directly increasing your time. Let's break it down. The first form of leverage is skills, high-value skills, skills that are in demand, skills that solve real problems, because the market doesn't pay based on effort, it pays based on value. 2 people can work equally hard and earn completely different incomes. Why? Because one is doing work that is easily replaceable, and the other is doing work that is difficult to replicate. That's the difference. So the question becomes, what skills are you building? Because your future income is directly connected to your current skill set. And here's the good news. In today's world, you can learn almost anything, online, on demand, at your pace. But here's the catch. Most people don't stay consistent long enough to become valuable. They start, they stop, they get distracted, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But the ones who commit, who spend that extra hour learning, practicing, improving, they separate themselves. And over time, that separation turns into opportunity. In the second form of leverage is systems. This is where things start to compound, because instead of trading time directly, you build something that continues to produce. A business, a digital product, a service that scales. Something that doesn't require your constant presence. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. It requires effort up front. But once it's built, it can continue generating income. Even when you're not actively working, that's the shift. From active income to scalable income. And in a world driven by technology, this has never been more accessible. People are building income streams from anywhere. Content, freelance work, automation, online platforms. Not because they're special, but because they decided to learn and stay consistent. The third form of leverage is investments. This is the ultimate goal because this is where your money starts working independently. You invest, you let it grow, and over time, it produces returns without your effort. This is the foundation of FIRE, not just earning more, but converting that income into assets. Assets that generate income, assets that replace your need to work. Now, here's where it all connects. Your income gives you fuel. Your savings rate determines how much fuel you keep. And your investments turn that fuel into a system that eventually runs on its own. That's the engine. Now let's bring this back to reality. You don't need to do everything at once. You don't need to build multiple streams overnight. You just need to start. One skill, one improvement, one step. Because progress compounds just like money does. And here's the line you need to remember. Your income grows when your value grows, not when your hours increase. That's the shift. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what am I doing right now to increase my value? Not tomorrow, not someday, today. Because that's where the change begins. And if this message is pushing you to think differently, if it's challenging how you approach your work, type this in the comments. I grow my value. Because that's the path. Now in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that quietly destroys progress. Something subtle, something most people don't even notice. But it's there, every day. And if you don't control it, it will undo everything you're trying to build. It's not your income, it's not your investments. It's your environment. And once you understand its influence, you'll realize why some people move forward, while others stay stuck in the same place for years. Chapter 8. The environment that controls your future. There's a force shaping your financial life every single day, and most people never notice it. It's not your job. It's not your income. It's not even your discipline. It's your environment, the people around you, the content you consume, the habits that feel normal. Because here's the truth. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your environment. Let that sink in. If your environment encourages spending, you will spend. If your environment normalizes debt, you will accept it. If your environment values appearance over freedom, you will feel pressure to keep up. And that pressure, it's subtle, but powerful. Now think about this. How many decisions you make are actually influenced by others? Buying something because it's trending, upgrading because someone else did, spending to feel included. It doesn't feel forced. It feels natural. But that's exactly how it works. Because the most dangerous influences don't feel like influence at all. They feel like choice. Now let's bring this back to FIRE. This path requires you to think differently, to act differently, to prioritize long-term freedom over short-term validation. And that creates friction, because you're no longer following the default script. You're stepping outside of it. And when you do that, you start to notice something not everyone will understand. Some people will question your choices. Some will think you're being too strict. Others will assume you're missing out. But here's the reality. They're not seeing what you see. They're not playing the same game. Because while they're optimizing for comfort today, you're optimizing for control tomorrow. And those two paths lead to very different outcomes. Now, this doesn't mean you isolate yourself. It doesn't mean you cut everyone off. But it does mean you become aware, selective, intentional, because your environment either supports your growth or slows it down. There's no neutral. Now let's talk about something even more subtle. Your digital environment. What you scroll, what you watch, what you listen to. Because this shapes your thinking more than you realize. If your feed is filled with consumption, you'll want more. If it's filled with distractions, you'll lose focus. But if you start surrounding yourself with ideas like this, discipline, growth, financial awareness, something shifts. You begin to think differently, act differently, move differently, because your input becomes your output. Now here's a simple but powerful question. What is my current environment training me to do? Not what you want to do, but what you're being conditioned to do. Because once you see that clearly, you can change it. You can start making small adjustments, following different voices, consuming different content, spending time with people who think long-term. And over time, those small changes create momentum, because growth is not just about what you do. It's about what you're exposed to. Now let's connect this to your financial life. If you're constantly surrounded by spending, saving will feel unnatural. If you're surrounded by discipline, saving becomes normal. That's the difference. And once something becomes normal, it becomes easy, not effortless, but easier. Now, I want you to reflect again. Look at your environment, your conversations, your habits, your daily inputs. Are they pushing you forward or holding you in place? Because you can't build a different future with the same environment that created your current one. Something has to shift, even slightly, because small changes compound over time, just like money. Now here's the line to carry with you. Your future is being shaped quietly by what you tolerate daily. So choose carefully. Now, if this chapter made you think, if you're starting to see your environment differently, type this in the comments. I choose my environment, because that's the step. Taking control of what influences you. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to move into something practical again. Something that sounds simple, but most people get completely wrong. Budgeting. Not the restrictive version, not the painful version, but a version that gives you clarity and control without making you feel trapped. Because when done right, a budget is not a limitation, it's a weapon. And once you learn how to use it, everything becomes easier. If you enjoy these audiobooks and want to support the channel, consider joining our private members community. Members get early access to new audiobooks and exclusive wealth lessons. Chapter 9. The Budget That Sets You Free. The word budget makes most people uncomfortable. It sounds restrictive, limiting, like something that takes away your freedom, so they avoid it. They guess their expenses. They hope things balance out. They tell themselves, I'll figure it out later. But later never comes. And without clarity, there is no control. Now here's the truth. A budget doesn't restrict your freedom. It reveals where your freedom is leaking. Let that sit with you. Because most people are not struggling due to lack of income. They're struggling due to lack of awareness. Money comes in, money goes out, and they don't fully see where it's going. It's invisible. And what's invisible can't be improved. Now think about this. If you had to explain exactly where every dollar went last month, could you do it? Not roughly, not approximately, exactly. Because that's the level of awareness that changes everything. Now let's redefine what a budget actually is. It's not a set of restrictions, it's a plan. A plan for your money, before it disappears, because without a plan, money gets spent by default. With a plan, money gets directed with intention, and intention, that's where freedom begins. Now let's build this in a simple way, not complicated, not overwhelming, just clear. There are three main categories your money flows into: needs, wants, and investments. Needs are your essentials: rent, food, utilities, the things that keep your life running. Wants are everything else: entertainment, dining out, upgrades, the things that make life enjoyable. And investments, that's your future, the part most people ignore because it doesn't feel urgent, but it is. Now here's the mistake most people make. They prioritize in the wrong order. They spend on wants first, then cover needs, and invest whatever is left, which is usually nothing. That's the default pattern. But the fire path flips this. It prioritizes investments first, then needs, then wants. Not because you shouldn't enjoy life, but because your future deserves a seat at the table, not just leftovers. Now imagine this. Every time you get paid, you automatically direct a percentage into investments. No thinking, no hesitation. It's done. Then you live on the rest. That one shift changes everything. Because now your progress is consistent, not dependent on mood, not dependent on discipline in the moment, but built into your system. And now let's talk about something deeper: emotional spending. Because not all spending is logical. Some of it is emotional: stress, boredom, comparison. You buy something, not because you need it, but because of how you feel. And in the moment, it works. You feel better, but only temporarily, because the underlying pattern remains. And over time, those small emotional decisions add up, quietly, consistently, delaying your progress. Now, this is not about eliminating emotion. It's about becoming aware of it. Because once you recognize the pattern, you can interrupt it, you can pause, you can ask, is this solving something real or just distracting me? That question alone will save you more money than any budget ever could. Now let's connect this back to your freedom number. Every dollar you save brings you closer. Every dollar you invest builds your system. And every unnecessary expense pushes that moment further away, not dramatically, but consistently. And consistency is what defines your outcome. Now here's a simple action. For the next 7 days, track everything. Not perfectly, but honestly. Every expense, every decision. Just observe. No judgment. Because awareness comes before change. And once you see clearly, you'll know exactly where to adjust. Now take a breath. Because this is where things start to become real. Not theoretical, not abstract, but practical. You're building awareness. You're building systems. You're building control. And that combination is powerful. Now, if this chapter made you rethink how you handle money, type this in the comments. I control my money. Because that's the shift from reacting to directing. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that can either accelerate your journey or completely destroy it: debt. Not all debt is the same, but most people treat it the same. And that mistake costs them years, sometimes decades. Because while they're trying to build wealth, something in the background is quietly pulling them backward. And once you understand how to deal with it properly, you remove one of the biggest obstacles in your path. Chapter 10. The Debt That Steals Your Future. Quietly. There's something most people carry without fully understanding the weight of it. It doesn't show up all at once. It doesn't feel dangerous at the beginning. In fact, it often feels helpful, convenient, necessary, even normal. That thing is debt. And if you don't learn how to handle it correctly, it will quietly delay your freedom for years, sometimes decades. Now let's be clear. Not all debt is the same. There is destructive debt and there is strategic debt. But most people never make that distinction. They treat all debt as normal, and that's where the problem begins. Let's start with destructive debt. This is the kind that works against you. High-interest credit cards, consumer loans, buying things you don't truly need with money you don't have. This type of debt does one thing. It pulls your future into the present and charges you interest for it. Think about that. You're not just paying for the item, you're paying extra for the time you borrowed, and over time, that extra cost compounds, quietly, relentlessly. Now, here's the part most people don't fully realize. While you're trying to invest and grow your money, high-interest debt is doing the opposite. It's compounding against you. So even if you're investing, you're moving forward and backward at the same time. And that cancels progress. This is why eliminating high-interest debt is not optional. It's foundational, because you cannot build freedom while something is actively draining your system. Now, let's talk about strategic debt. This is different. Lower interest, used for assets. Something that has the potential to grow or generate income. Examples can include education, business investments, or certain types of property. But even here, caution matters, because the line between strategic and destructive is often blurred by emotion. People justify purchases as investments, when in reality, they're just expensive decisions. So the key is simple. If the debt helps you build, it can be useful. If it only helps you consume, it's holding you back. Now let's go deeper, because debt is not just financial, it's psychological. It creates pressure, stress, obligation, dependency. It limits your choices, because when you owe money, you don't have full control. You can't walk away from situations easily. You can't take risks. You can't move freely. That's the hidden cost. Not just the interest, but the loss of flexibility. And flexibility is a form of freedom. Now imagine two people again, same income, same opportunities. One has no debt. The other carries heavy payments every month. Who has more options? Who has more control? Who can move faster toward independence? It's not even close. Because debt reduces your margin. And margin is where growth happens. Now, here's something powerful. Every payment you make toward debt is not just reducing a number. It's reclaiming control. It's removing weight. It's creating space. And that space can then be redirected into savings, into investments, into your future. Now, I want you to be honest with yourself. What role is debt playing in your life right now? Is it helping you move forward or holding you in place? Because awareness here is critical. You don't need to fix everything overnight, but you do need to face it directly, without excuses, without avoidance, because ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It makes it grow. Now, here's a simple approach. If you have high interest debt, prioritize it aggressively. before heavy investing, because the return on eliminating that interest is guaranteed. No market risk, no uncertainty, just progress. And once that weight is gone, everything else becomes easier. Now, take a breath, because this chapter is not about fear, it's about clarity. Because once you understand how debt works, you stop being controlled by it, and you start controlling it. Now, if this message made you reflect, if it made you look at your situation differently, type this in the comments, "I remove the weight," because that's what this is, removing what's holding you back so you can move forward freely. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that separates those who succeed in fire from those who quit halfway. Discipline, not motivation, not inspiration, discipline. Because the truth is simple, this path is not difficult because it's complicated. It's difficult because it requires consistency. And consistency requires something most people avoid when things get uncomfortable. That's where we're going next. Chapter 11, Discipline, the skill that buys you. Freedom, there's a moment in every journey where motivation disappears. At the beginning, everything feels exciting. You discover fire, you calculate your number, you feel inspired, you tell yourself, "This is it, I'm going to change my life." And for a while, you do. You save more, you track your spending, you invest consistently. But then life happens, you get tired, you get distracted, you lose momentum, and suddenly the habits that felt easy start to feel heavy. That's the moment that decides everything, because this path is not built on motivation. It's built on discipline, and discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. Now, let's be honest, that's not comfortable, because discipline doesn't care about your mood. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It simply asks, are you going to follow through or not? And most people negotiate. They tell themselves, I'll start again tomorrow. I deserve a break. It's not a big deal this time. But here's the truth. Every small exception becomes a pattern, and patterns shape your future. There's something powerful mentioned in one of the transcripts you've seen. The idea that laziness doesn't always look like doing nothing. Sometimes it looks like distractions, scrolling, busy work, avoiding what actually matters. And that's dangerous, because it feels like progress when it's not. Now think about your own life. Where do you avoid discipline? Where do you negotiate with yourself? Because those moments, those small decisions, are where your future is built. Not in the big moves, but in the quiet ones. Now, here's something important. Discipline is not something you're born with. It's something you build through repetition, through consistency, through choosing action, even when it's uncomfortable. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes, not effortless, but automatic. Because your identity starts to shift. You stop being someone who tries to be disciplined and becomes someone who is disciplined. And that changes everything. Now let's connect this back to fire. Saving money requires discipline. Investing consistently requires discipline. Ignoring distractions requires discipline. This entire path is built on small repeated decisions, and without discipline, those decisions fall apart. But here's the part most people miss. Discipline is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. You will make mistakes. You will slip. You will have moments where you lose focus. That's normal. The difference is what you do next. Do you quit or do you reset? Because the people who succeed are not the ones who never fail. They're the ones who return quickly, who don't let one mistake turn into a pattern. Now, here's a simple framework. When you feel resistance, when you don't feel like doing what you know you should, don't think about the entire journey. Just focus on the next step. One action, one decision. Because discipline grows in small moments, not overwhelming ones. Now, take a moment, think about your daily routine. Where can you apply more discipline? Not everywhere, just one area, because one change, repeated daily, becomes a transformation. Now here's the line to carry with you. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your standards, and discipline is what sets your standard. If this chapter hit you, if you recognize where you've been negotiating with yourself, type this in the comments. I do what must be done, because that's the shift from intention to action. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something deeper, something internal, your mindset, because even with discipline, even with the right strategy, if your thinking is not aligned, you will sabotage your own progress. And most people don't even realize they're doing it, because the biggest limitations are not external, they're internal. And once you identify them, you can finally move forward without resistance. Chapter 12, the mindset that decides your timeline. There's something more powerful than your income, more influential than your strategy, more decisive than your discipline, your mindset. Because no matter how perfect your plan is, if your thinking is limited, you will limit your results. Quietly, without even realizing it. Most people don't fail financially because they lack information. They fail because of the way they think about money, the beliefs they've carried for years, beliefs they never questioned, beliefs like money is hard to make, investing is risky, I'm just not good with finances, people like me don't retire early. These thoughts don't feel like barriers. They feel like truth, but they're not. They're patterns, and patterns can be changed. Now, here's the uncomfortable part. Your current financial situation is a reflection of your past thinking, not your potential, your thinking, because every decision you've made was influenced by what you believed, and if those beliefs don't change, your results won't either. There's a powerful idea reflected across the material you've seen, the concept that everything begins with ownership, not blame, not excuses. Ownership, because the moment you take full responsibility, you gain control, and control is where change begins. Now let's go deeper. There are two types of mindsets when it comes to money: the consumer mindset and the builder mindset. The consumer mindset asks, what can I afford right now? The builder mindset asks, what will this cost me in the future? The consumer focuses on comfort. The builder focuses on freedom. The consumer reacts. The builder plans. And this difference shows up in every decision. Now think about your own patterns. When you receive money, what's your first instinct? Spend, save, invest? Because that instinct is your programming. And until you become aware of it, it will continue running your life. Now, here's something powerful. Your mindset doesn't change through information alone. It changes through repetition, through exposure, through consistent reminders of a different way of thinking. That's why what you listen to, what you read, what you surround yourself with matters so much, because it rewires your default thinking. Now, let's talk about fear, because fear is one of the biggest mental barriers in this journey. Fear of losing money, fear of making mistakes, fear of not having enough. And because of that fear, people stay safe. They avoid investing, they delay decisions, they wait for certainty. But here's the truth. Certainty doesn't exist. And waiting for it costs you more than any mistake ever could. Now, this doesn't mean you act recklessly. It means you act informed. You learn, you understand. You take calculated steps because progress requires movement, and movement requires courage. Now, here's the shift you need to make. Stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What happens if I stay the same?" Because staying the same is the most expensive decision you can make, not immediately, but over time. Now take a moment. Be honest with yourself. What beliefs are holding you back? Not surface level, but deep. The ones that shape your decisions. Because once you identify them, you can challenge them. You can replace them. And over time, you can rebuild your thinking. Kaka. Now, here's the line to remember. Your financial future is built first in your mind, then in your actions. So if you want a different result, you need a different mindset. If this chapter made you reflect, if you recognized patterns in your thinking, type this in the comments. I think like a builder, because that's the shift from passive to intentional. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to connect everything you've learned so far into a clear path, a timeline. Because understanding the principles is one thing, but knowing how to apply them, step by step, that's where real progress begins. And once you see how it all fits together, you'll realize something powerful. This is not just possible, it's predictable. If you like this audiobook, please give it a like. It will really help us promote the video. That's chapter 13, the timeline from paycheck to freedom. At this point, something inside you should feel different, not just motivated, clear, because now you understand the pieces. Income, savings rate, investments, discipline, mindset. But understanding pieces is not enough. You need a path, a sequence, a timeline you can follow. Because when things feel structured, they feel achievable. So let's bring it all together, not as theory, but as a real journey, a progression from where you are now to the moment where work becomes optional. Phase 1, foundation. This is where most people underestimate the importance because it doesn't look impressive, it's not exciting, but it's critical. This phase is about control, understanding your money, tracking your expenses, eliminating high-interest debt, building basic discipline. This is where you stop drifting, where you take ownership, where you face reality without avoiding it. Because without a foundation, everything else collapses. In this phase, your focus is simple: stability, not growth, not speed. Stability, because once your system is stable, you can build on it. Phase 2, accumulation. Now, things start to move. This is where you increase your savings rate, where you become intentional with spending, where you start investing consistently. This phase requires discipline, because results are still slow. Progress is still quiet, and this is where most people quit. But if you stay consistent, something begins to happen. Momentum. As this is also where you start increasing your income strategically, not by working endlessly, but by increasing your value, learning skills, creating leverage, expanding your opportunities. Because more income, combined with a high savings rate, accelerates everything. Phase 3, acceleration. This is where things start to feel different. Your investments begin to grow faster, not because you're doing more, but because compounding is starting to work. This is the phase described in the idea you saw earlier, where growth begins to outpace effort, where your money starts working harder than you do. And for the first time, you see it, not as a concept, but as reality. This phase requires patience, because it's tempting to interfere, to change strategy, to chase something new. But this is where consistency matters most, because you're approaching the turning point. Phase 4, crossover. This is the moment everything leads to. Your investments generate enough income to cover your expenses. You no longer need to work. You can, but you don't have to. This is financial independence. Now, here's something important. This moment doesn't always feel dramatic. There's no sudden explosion, no instant transformation, just a quiet realization: I'm free. And that realization changes everything. Because now your decisions are no longer driven by necessity. They're driven by choice. You can work on what matters. You can take risks. You can step away when needed. That's real freedom. Now, let's be honest again. This timeline is not instant. It requires years, consistency, focus. But here's the part most people miss. Time will pass anyway. 5 years will pass. 10 years will pass. The only question is, where will you be when they do? Now imagine 2 versions of your future. One where nothing changes, same habits, same patterns, same cycle, and one where you follow this path, where you build intentionally, where you stay consistent, where you move toward freedom, step by step. Which one feels real? Because the difference is not luck. It's decisions, repeated over time. Now take a moment. Let this sink in. This is not a dream. It's a process, and processes can be followed. Here's the line to remember. Financial freedom is not a moment. It's the result of years of quiet consistency. If this chapter gave you clarity, if you can see the path more clearly now, type this in the comments. I follow the path, because that's the commitment, not to perfection, but to progress. Now, in the next chapter, We're going to talk about something that can accelerate this entire timeline or completely derail it: risk. Because while building wealth, you will face uncertainty. Markets will move, opportunities will appear, fear will show up, and how you respond to that will determine whether you move forward or fall back. And most people handle it the wrong way. Let's fix that next. Chapter 14, Risk, the invisible force that tests you. At some point in this journey, you will feel it, that moment of uncertainty, a shift in the market, a drop in your investments, a headline designed to create fear. And suddenly, everything you believed feels unstable. You start questioning your decisions. Did I make a mistake? Should I pull out? What if I lose everything? That's risk. Not just the numbers moving, but the emotions they trigger. Because here's the truth most people don't realize. Risk is not what happens in the market. It's how you react to it. Let that sink in. Because two people can face the exact same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes. One panics, the other stays steady, one reacts emotionally, the other follows their plan. Same event, different result. Now, let's break this down. When you invest, there will be fluctuations, ups and downs. That's normal. That's part of the system. But most people expect a straight line. And when reality doesn't match that expectation, they lose confidence. They step out. They interrupt compounding. And that's where the real damage happens. Because remember this, compounding only works if you stay in the game. And the biggest threat to that is not the market. It's your reaction to it. Now, let's go deeper. There are two types of risk you need to understand: short-term risk and long-term risk. Short-term risk is volatility. Prices moving up and down. Temporary losses. Noise. Long-term risk is something else entirely. It's not reaching your goals, not building enough, running out of time. And here's the irony. Most people focus on short-term risk and completely ignore long-term risk. They avoid investing because they fear losing money today. But in doing so, they guarantee they won't build enough for tomorrow. That's the real danger. Now think about this. What's riskier? Investing consistently over time, or relying entirely on a paycheck for decades? Because one depends on a system, and the other depends on your continuous effort, your time, your energy, your ability to keep going, and that's not guaranteed. Now, let's talk about control, because you can't eliminate risk, but you can manage it through diversification, through long-term thinking, through staying consistent, not reacting to every movement, but trusting the process. Because the market has cycles, and those cycles are where opportunity exists. Okay, now, here's something powerful. Every downturn, every moment of fear is also a moment of potential, because when others are pulling out, the disciplined stay in. When others are reacting, the focused stay steady. And over time, that difference compounds. But this is not easy, because it goes against instinct, against emotion, against everything that tells you to protect yourself immediately. But here's the shift. You're not protecting yourself from short-term discomfort. You're protecting your long-term future. Now, take a moment. Think about your reaction to uncertainty. Do you stay calm, or do you react? because your reaction will define your results. Here's the line to carry with you. The market rewards patience and punishes emotion. And once you understand that, you stop trying to control everything and start focusing on what actually matters: consistency. If this chapter made you reflect, if you recognize your own reactions in these moments, type this in the comments: I stay steady. Because that's the skill, not predicting the future, but staying grounded through it. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that many people misunderstand completely: the idea of retirement itself. Because the goal is not to escape work, it's to redesign your life. And once you understand that shift, everything becomes clearer, because freedom is not about doing nothing. It's about choosing everything. And that changes how you approach this entire journey. Chapter 15, Redefining Retirement. It was never about stopping. Most people have a very specific image in their mind when they hear the word retirement. You stop working, you slow down, you finally rest. Maybe it looks like sitting on a beach or doing nothing all day. And for a moment, that sounds appealing because you're tired of routines, tired of obligations, tired of trading your time for something that doesn't feel meaningful. So the idea of stopping feels like freedom. But here's the truth. The goal is not to escape work. The goal is to escape dependence. Let that sink in. Because retirement, in the traditional sense, is outdated. It was built around the idea that work is something you endure until you're finally allowed to stop. But what if that's the wrong goal? What if instead of asking, how do I stop working, you asked, how do I only do work that matters to me? That's a completely different question, and it leads to a completely different life. Because here's what happens to many people who retire without purpose. They feel lost, disconnected, uncertain about what to do next, because work, for better or worse, gave them structure, identity, direction, and when that disappears, so does clarity. This is why the FIRE movement is often misunderstood. People think it's about quitting everything, but in reality, it's about choosing everything, choosing how you spend your time, choosing what you work on, choosing what you say yes to, and what you walk away from. That's the difference. But now, imagine this. You wake up in the morning and you don't have to go anywhere. No pressure, no obligation, just space. And in that space, you decide. Do you want to work today? If yes, what kind of work? Something meaningful, something creative, something aligned with who you are? Or maybe you don't work. Maybe you learn, build, travel, spend time with people who matter. That's freedom, not doing nothing, but having the power to choose. Now, let's bring this back to your journey. Because if your only motivation is to escape, you'll burn out. You'll rush the process. You'll make decisions based on emotion, not strategy. But if your motivation is to build a life you actually want, you move differently. You become patient, intentional, focused on the long-term vision. Now here's a powerful shift. Start thinking about your retired life now, not later, now. What would you do if money wasn't the main factor? What would your days look like? What kind of work would you choose? Because the clearer that vision becomes, the more aligned your actions will be. And here's something interesting. Many people who reach financial independence don't stop working. They just stop working on things they hate. They redirect their energy toward passion, toward purpose, toward impact. Because when money is no longer the driver, something deeper takes its place. Now take a moment. Be honest with yourself. If you didn't have to work for money, what would you do? Not the fantasy version, the real version. Because that answer matters. It gives your journey direction. Here's the line to carry with you. Freedom is not the absence of work. It's the presence of choice. And once you understand that, you stop chasing escape and start building alignment. And if this chapter made you rethink what retirement means, if it shifted your perspective, type this in the comments. I choose my life, because that's what this is about. Not escaping life, but designing it. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something very real, something that affects almost everyone on this path. Burnout. Because pushing too hard, moving too fast, trying to be perfect, can break your consistency. And without consistency, everything slows down. So the question becomes, how do you stay in the game without losing yourself along the way? That's what we're about to uncover. Chapter 16. Burnout, the silent killer of consistency. There's a point in this journey where effort turns into pressure, where discipline starts to feel like force, where the path that once felt clear begins to feel heavy. That's burnout, and if you don't understand it, it will quietly break your momentum. Because here's the truth. You don't fail because the plan doesn't work. You fail because you stop following it. And burnout is one of the main reasons people stop. At the beginning, everything feels powerful. You're motivated, you're focused, you're ready to change your life. So you go all in. You cut every expense. You push your savings rate to the extreme. You try to optimize everything at once. And for a while, it works. But then something shifts. You feel restricted. You feel tired. You feel like you're missing out. And slowly, that pressure builds. Until one day, you snap. You spend impulsively. You stop tracking. You lose discipline. And just like that, you fall back into old patterns. This is the cycle most people go through, not because they lack knowledge, but because they tried to move too fast, too aggressively, without sustainability. Because here's something important. This is a long-term journey, not a sprint, not a short burst of effort, but a sustained, consistent process. And anything that isn't sustainable will eventually break. Now, let's go deeper. Burnout doesn't always look obvious. It's not always extreme exhaustion. Sometimes it's subtle, loss of interest, small compromises, gradual disengagement. You stop caring as much. You stop tracking closely. You tell yourself, it's okay this time. And slowly, your system weakens. Now, think about your own habits. Have you ever started strong only to fall off later? That's not failure. That's a lack of sustainability. Now, here's the shift. Instead of asking, how fast can I reach freedom? Ask, how can I stay consistent for years? Because that's the real question. And the answer is balance. Not extreme restriction, not eliminating everything you enjoy, but designing a system you can actually live with, a system that allows progress without breaking you. Because here's the truth. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. And consistency requires flexibility. Now let's make this practical. Instead of cutting everything, choose intentionally. Keep what truly adds value. Remove what doesn't. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. That difference matters. Because when something feels like a choice, it feels sustainable. And now, here's another important piece. Rest is not weakness. Taking breaks, resetting your mind, stepping back when needed. That's part of the process. Because discipline without recovery leads to burnout, and burnout leads to inconsistency. So the goal is not constant intensity, it's steady progress, a pace you can maintain, a rhythm you can follow. Now take a moment, ask yourself, am I building something sustainable, or am I pushing too hard, too fast? Because your pace will determine your outcome. So here's the line to carry with you. It's better to move slowly and consistently than fast and temporarily. Because slow progress still leads forward, but stopping resets everything. If this chapter made you reflect, if you recognize moments where you pushed too hard, type this in the comments. I stay consistent, because that's the real goal. Not perfection, consistency. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something powerful, something that can accelerate your journey in a completely different way. Your network, the people you surround yourself with. Because while environment shapes your habits, your network can shape your opportunities. And once you understand how to use that, you open doors most people never even see. Chapter 17, Your Network, the shortcut, most people ignore. There's something powerful hiding in plain sight, something that can accelerate your progress, open doors you didn't even know existed, and completely change your trajectory. Your network, the people you surround yourself with, the conversations you have, the ideas you're exposed to, the standards you absorb. Because here's the truth. You don't just become what you do. You become who you're around. And most people underestimate this. Okay, they focus on working harder, saving more, learning more, but they ignore one of the most powerful accelerators available, being in the right environment with the right people. Now think about this. If everyone around you is focused on spending, that becomes normal. If everyone around you is focused on growth, that becomes normal. If people around you are building, you start thinking bigger, acting differently, moving with more intention. It's because your network doesn't just influence your habits, it influences your beliefs. What you think is possible, what you think is realistic, what you think you're capable of. Now here's where it gets even more powerful. Your network can create opportunities, new ideas, new income streams, new ways of thinking. Because when you're connected to people who are building, you gain access to knowledge that goes beyond theory. Real experiences, real lessons, real shortcuts. Now let's be clear. This is not about using people. It's about growing with people. Learning, sharing, building together. Because the strongest networks are built on value, not transactions. Now, here's the challenge. Building the right network requires intention, because your current environment is not random. It's a result of your past decisions. So, if you want something different, you have to create it. That might mean seeking out new communities, engaging in conversations that challenge you, learning from people who are ahead of you, not comparing, but learning. Because comparison creates pressure, but learning creates growth. Now, here's something important. You don't need a massive network. You need the right one. Even a few people who think long-term, who value growth, who understand this path, can change everything. Yes, now let's connect this back to your journey, because this path can feel isolating at times when you're saving more than others, spending less, thinking differently. It's easy to feel like you're alone, but you're not. There are people out there building the same way you are, thinking the same way you are, moving with the same intention, and when you find them, everything becomes easier. So because now you're not just relying on discipline, you're supported by your environment, by your conversations, by your network. Take a moment. Look at the people around you, your daily interactions, your conversations. Are they pushing you forward or keeping you where you are? Because here's the line to remember. Your network can either expand your vision or limit it. So choose carefully. If this chapter made you reflect, if you see the importance of your environment more clearly now, type this in the comments. I build with the right people, because that's the shift from isolation to alignment. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that many people overlook, but it quietly determines whether you actually reach freedom. Consistency over time, not just days, not just months, years. Because the real challenge is not starting, it's staying. And once you understand how to maintain momentum over the long term, you unlock something most people never experience: sustained growth. Chapter 18, The Power of Staying. Why most people never finish starting is exciting. There's energy in the beginning, momentum, clarity. You feel like you're finally taking control. But here's the truth most people don't talk about. Starting is common, finishing is rare. Because the real challenge is not the first step, it's the 1,000th. Anyone can get motivated for a week. Anyone can save money for a month. Anyone can feel inspired after hearing a message like this, but can you stay consistent? When the excitement fades, when progress feels slow, when nothing seems to be changing, that's where most people fall off. Because consistency over time requires something deeper than motivation. It requires identity. At the beginning, you're trying to change your habits, but over time, your habits need to become part of who you are. Not something you do occasionally, but something you are. You're not someone who tries to save money. You're someone who builds wealth. You're not someone who invests sometimes. You're someone who invests consistently. That shift changes everything. Because when something becomes part of your identity, it stops feeling optional. Now let's go deeper. Time has a strange effect on people. In the short term, it feels slow, but in the long term, it moves fast. Years pass before you even realize it, and this is where most people lose, because they underestimate what can happen over time and overestimate what should happen immediately. Or they expect results too soon, and when those results don't show up, they stop, not realizing they were building something that takes time. Let's bring this back to compounding. The early years feel slow, almost invisible, but the later years, that's where everything accelerates. And if you quit early, you never reach that part. Now, think about this. What if you stayed consistent for 5 years? Not perfect, but consistent. Saving, investing, improving. Where would you be? Because most people don't fail over 5 years. They fail over 5 days. They lose momentum quickly, and then they restart again and again and again, never building enough consistency to see real results. Now, here's the shift. Stop thinking in days. Stop thinking in weeks. Start thinking in years. Because this is a long-term game, and long-term thinking creates long-term results. Now, let's make this practical. Instead of focusing on perfection, focus on repetition, small actions, repeated daily, tracking your spending, investing consistently, making intentional decisions. Over time, those small actions compound, just like money does. Now, here's something powerful. Consistency builds confidence, because every time you follow through, you reinforce your identity. You prove to yourself, I do what I say I'm going to do, and that belief becomes unshakable. Now, take a moment. Be honest with yourself. Where have you been inconsistent? Where have you started but not followed through? Because awareness is the first step to correction. But here's the line to carry with you. Success is not built in moments of intensity, but in years of consistency. If this chapter made you reflect, if you recognize the importance of staying in the game, type this in the comments. I stay the course. Because that's the difference. Not speed, not perfection, consistency. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that can completely transform your journey. Acceleration. Because while consistency builds the foundation, there are specific strategies that can compress your timeline without increasing your stress, without burning you out. And once you understand how to apply them, you'll realize something powerful. You're closer than you think. Chapter 19, Acceleration, Compressing Time Without Losing Control. There's a moment in this journey where things start to click. You've built discipline. You understand your numbers. You've created consistency. And now the question becomes, how do I move faster without breaking what I've built? Because speed is tempting. Everyone wants results sooner. But here's the danger. Speed without structure leads to collapse. So acceleration, done wrong, destroys progress. But done right, it compresses years into shorter, focused periods. Now, Let's break this down. There are 3 powerful ways to accelerate your path to financial independence. Not shortcuts, not hacks, but strategic moves. The first accelerator: increasing your savings rate intentionally. Not aggressively, not unsustainably, but strategically. Because small increases make a massive difference over time. Let's say you're saving 20%. If you increase that to 30%, you don't just move 10% faster, you dramatically shorten your timeline because more money is being invested earlier, and earlier investments have more time to compound. Atara. Now, here's the key. You don't increase your savings rate by suffering. You increase it by optimizing, cutting what doesn't matter, keeping what does, because when your life is aligned, saving doesn't feel like sacrifice, it feels like progress. The second accelerator: increasing your income with purpose, not by working more hours endlessly, but by increasing your value, skills, opportunities, leverage, because when your income grows and your lifestyle stays controlled, the gap expands, and that gap is where acceleration happens. But this is where many people make a mistake. They increase their income, but increase their spending at the same pace, and they stay in the same position. But if you hold your lifestyle steady and direct that extra income into investments, your timeline shrinks dramatically. Hey, this is how people compress decades into years, not through luck, but through intentional decisions. The third accelerator: focus. This is the most underrated one, because in a world full of distractions, focus is rare. Every day, you're being pulled in different directions: social media, noise, endless options. And every distraction costs you time, energy, clarity. But when you focus, when you decide what matters and eliminate what doesn't, your progress becomes faster, cleaner, more direct. Now, here's something important. Acceleration is not about doing everything at once. It's about doing the right things consistently. Because doing more doesn't always mean moving faster, but doing what matters always does. Now, let's go deeper. There's a concept mentioned in one of the ideas you've seen, the idea of compressing time through focused phases, periods where you intentionally prioritize growth, where you push slightly harder, but still stay within sustainability. And this is where acceleration becomes real, not constant pressure, but intentional periods of focus, followed by stability. Because the goal is not to rush. The goal is to move efficiently, to remove wasted effort, to align your actions with your outcome. Now take a moment, ask yourself, where can I improve my efficiency? Not by doing more, but by doing better. Because every improvement, every optimization compounds, just like money does. Here's the line to carry with you. You don't need more time. You need better direction. If this chapter made you rethink your approach, if you see where you can move more intentionally, type this in the comments. I move with purpose, because that's the shift from effort to efficiency. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something deeper, something that often gets ignored in financial conversations, your identity. Because at the highest level, this journey is not about money, it's about who you become in the process. And that transformation is what makes the result permanent. Chapter 20. Identity, the person who reaches freedom. At the deepest level, this journey is not about money. Not really. Money is the tool, the system, the mechanism, but the real transformation is internal. Because the version of you who starts this journey is not the same version who finishes it. Think about that. You don't just reach financial independence. You become someone capable of sustaining it. And that requires change. Because here's the truth. You cannot build a different life while staying the same person. Let that sink in. If your habits don't change, if your thinking doesn't evolve, if your discipline doesn't strengthen, your results will always reflect your current identity. Now, let's go deeper. Right now, you have an identity around money. Even if you've never defined it, it shows up in your behavior, how you spend, how you save, how you react to opportunities. Maybe you see yourself as someone who struggles with money, or someone who avoids it, or someone who feels like it's complicated. Those identities shape your actions, and your actions shape your outcomes. But here's the powerful part. Identity is not fixed. It's built. Through repetition, through decisions, through consistency. Every time you make a disciplined choice, you reinforce a new identity. Every time you invest consistently, you become someone who builds wealth. Every time you choose long-term thinking, you strengthen that version of yourself. Now, let's bring everything back. Because this journey was never about chasing something distant. It was about building something step by step, understanding the system, controlling your money, staying consistent, becoming disciplined, thinking differently, and over time, those pieces came together. Now, here's the line to carry with you. Freedom doesn't arrive suddenly. It's built quietly until one day you realize you've already arrived. If this chapter made you feel something, if you can see that moment for yourself, type this in the comments. I see it. Because that vision is what pulls you forward. Now, in the final chapter, we're going to close this journey, not with an ending, but with a decision. Because everything you've heard, everything you've understood, comes down to one question. What will you do now? Chapter 25, The Choice, What Happens Next, is up to you. You've reached the end of this journey, not the end of the path, but the end of this moment. You've heard the ideas, you've seen the system, you've understood the process, and now everything comes down to one simple question. What will you do now? Because this is where most people stop, right here, at understanding, at awareness, at this makes sense. And then they go back to old habits, back to old patterns, back to the same life they were living before, not because they want to, but because they don't decide. And that's the difference. Not knowledge, not opportunity. Decision. Because here's the truth. Your future is not decided by what you know, but by what you choose to repeat. Everything you've learned in this audiobook comes down to repetition, saving repeatedly, investing repeatedly, choosing discipline repeatedly, thinking long-term repeatedly, not once, not occasionally, but consistently, because consistency is what turns information into transformation. But now let's be real for a moment. This path is not easy. It requires effort, patience, focus. There will be moments where you doubt yourself, moments where progress feels slow, moments where the world around you pulls you in a different direction. And in those moments, you will have a choice: go back or move forward, because the system works, but only if you stay in it. Now imagine your life 1 year from now. If you do nothing, if everything stays the same. And now, imagine your life 1 year from now. If you apply what you've learned, even imperfectly, even slowly. Which version feels different? Which version feels real? It's because that difference is built by the decisions you make starting today. Now let's bring everything together one final time. You understand the system. Earn, save, invest, repeat. After you understand the mindset, long-term thinking, intentional decisions, ownership. Shall you understand the habits, consistency, discipline, focus. You understand the goal, not escaping work, but gaining control over your time. And now, you have everything you need. No more waiting, no more searching, no more someday. Just a path and a decision to follow it. Take a breath. Let this moment sink in, because this is where everything begins. Here's the final line to carry with you. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a committed version of yourself. If this audiobook gave you clarity, if it shifted your perspective, if it made you think differently about your life, take a moment. I'd like this video not for the algorithm, but as a promise to yourself, a signal that you're choosing a different path. Leave a comment. What's the first action you're going to take? Make it real. Make it specific. Because clarity creates commitment. And if you want to stay consistent, if you want reminders like this to keep you focused, subscribe. Not just to listen, but to stay aligned. And if there's someone in your life, someone stuck in the same cycle you once felt, share this with them. Because sometimes one idea at the right moment can change everything. Now this is where your journey continues, not here, not in words, but in action. And one day, not suddenly, but quietly, you'll reach that moment where you look at your life and realize you're no longer chasing freedom. You built it. And when that day comes, you'll understand something most people never do. Freedom was never out of reach. It was waiting for you to decide.